Now, how I became a writer is, I think it's multiple answers, but I'll start with the oldest answer, which would be during my childhood. So I always grew up playing pranks, playing jokes, um, playing pranks on my parents. Back in the day, back when there were home phones, we had like two phones in the house generally that belonged to the landline. And it was always a thing to not answer if it was a bill collector, not answer if it was toll free. So what I would do is I'd have one phone kind of in my back pocket, and then I'd have another phone. And I'd say, "Hey, mom, dad, I'm sorry, I accidentally answered the phone when it was toll free." And I'd hand them the phone. They'd say hello. I'd hurry up, run upstairs, and hello, can I speak with Cyrus? Because my name is Cyrus, but my father's name is Cyrus as well. And I would start off doing stuff like that. I started off just pranking the people that were around me, my parents. If we'd all go somewhere and either go visit a family member or a friend, whenever we'd come back home, I'd often recite what the family member or person said. If I found it interesting, I'd mock them, you know. So I started off like that. And then I also, in one of those books where you write what you want to be when you grow up, I'm 98% sure in like my first grade when I wrote, I want to be an author. It was an interesting thing. I mean, every Thursday at my elementary school, called Jefferson Elementary School in Bellwood, Illinois, we would go and check out books. And then I think we had like a week or two to read the book, and then we'd have to take a test on it. And we take a test on this program called AR Reading. So that was my first like intro to books. I remember going to the library, smelling it, and I loved library days because it was an escape, honestly, from the classroom. And so that's kind of how it started. Now, obviously, not well. I got away from that. Okay, so I'm not gonna act like I just came up just this book person and no, not at all. That was the beginning, and then once I started like playing sports, I think I kind of got away from author. I was always a storyteller though, always. I just might not have been putting it in word form, but I was always telling stories in some kind of way. I mean, even in high school when I played football, it was always a big thing to get a scholarship. Got to get a scholarship to go play ball somewhere. Got to get a preferably a Division I scholarship. But if we can get into a real good Division II, that's cool too. So what I would do is I would send fake text messages to my friends, pretending to be college coaches, pretending that I was, offering them a scholarship. And I mean, I would do research. I would actually go to this college's website, look up the roster, look up who the recruiting coordinator was, who the recruiting coordinator was for this specific area. We were in the Chicago area, so I would look that up, and I really get some of my friends. I remember one friend told me when he did get a real scholarship, he got a phone call and got a scholarship offer. He said, I couldn't be happy because I didn't know if that was you or not. So I've always been a storyteller, or whether it was, verbal or, whatever case may have been, I always told stories. So fast forward, well, you know what, let me tell you this. So I'm not a criminal by any stretch of the imagination, but I will say this. The one and only time The one and only time I ever got arrested is because I made up a story. I made up a fake text. This was back in 2014, fake text, and yeah, ended up getting a disorderly conduct and a false impersonation. More to come on that. I'm not going to explain what that is because I'm actually going to put that in the book, in a future book. Um, so fast forward to 2018, I started taking classes at Northeastern Illinois University in Chicago. So they had two campuses, or actually three. They had the main campus, which is north on like Burmar, and then they had the El Centro campus, which is, I think like, it's more closer to the north campus, northwest side of Chicago somewhere. And then they had the Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies, because I studied Inner City Studies, is what I studied there. And that was on the south side of Chicago. It was on 39th and Cottage Grove. And I had some great professors, great professors. And, I think going there kind of, I already was open because, people are like, why are you going to school there? You live in the suburbs. Why are you going to school in the city? And why'd you pick? Because I'm curious. That's how I got here in the first place. I'm just curious. I've always been curious about things. I always wanted to learn more. So I thought that would be a good thing to study, which it was. Which it was. I loved it. So long story short, I'm taking classes there, and we're listening to jazz music. We're learning about August Wilson, and my mind is just getting open to just artistry and just all these people that came before me. And like I said, I started listening to jazz music around this time, so my mind is just open. And one day I was cramming for class, last minute reads. And I think the chapter was on popular culture. And the chapter, when I was reading it, it said how nowadays people are able to express themselves, you know, more independently when it comes to writing books. They can self-publish books. They don't need to go nowhere or go to somebody to get permission. They can self-publish their own books. And then I was like, huh. At that moment, I really didn't think to start writing, but it definitely hit me and it made me think. So let's say 6 months after that, I started writing in my notebook. I did. I started writing. I think I got like a 30,000 word manuscript sitting on my old computer that I just wrote it and I just left it. I am gonna resurrect it at some point in my career, but yeah, I just started writing in my little. I was renting like a. Essentially, it was a dorm, but it was like a room for rent in Hyde Park in Chicago. It was like $625, all utilities included, and I just sit in there and I'd write. I caught the bug. I was reading it, and when I was reading that chapter, I was actually in the inner city studies building. I was upstairs in the library. See, and that's when I I guess I caught the bug there for writing. This is what's kind of scary. As you can see now, I'm 4 publications in, 3 books, 1 fictional newspaper, and 1 fictional newspaper on the way. That building where I was taking classes at, where I read that about the self-publishing and where, the thought entered my mind of writing, that building used to be where a group called the Southside Writers Group, people like Richard Wright and some other authors from the kind of like early mid 1900s that lived in Chicago, they would meet there every week. It was called the Southside Writers Group. They would meet in that building. See, back then, that building was called the Abraham Lincoln Center. But then, I guess the university bought it. Now it's the Jacob Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies. They used to meet there. So I don't know if, actually I do know. They did come to me. They did. I think in that building, there were, I don't want to say spirits, but there were entities that entered me. And it probably was just fate. So here we are. Like I said, I'm 3 books in. 1 fictional newspaper. This here is my first book, Rockhurst. Story about 2 boys. They have a neighborhood basketball court. An incident happens at the court, and then the village comes in and they remove the basketball rims from the backboards. So pretty much the book is just about those boys trying to be able to still chase their dreams despite not having that neighborhood basketball court anymore. This is my first book. My second book I wrote is called 10 Jams. Now this is a collection of short stories. One of the stories in here is about this police officer. He does some illegal things on the side because he's trying to make some extra money to be able to keep his son in this prestigious high school that he really can't afford. Another story in here is about this guy that wakes up in heaven, and he knows good and well that him and his girlfriend both died at the same time. So he asks God, he's like, God, where's my girl at? We both died together in the car accident. God's like, yeah, she's up here in heaven, but you can't get to her. You two live in two separate territories of heaven because of XYZ. I don't want to get into that. I don't want to break it for you. You're going to have to read it, check it out. Another story in here is about this old man that lives in Chicago, and he's just prejudiced against young men that have dreadlocks. He thinks that every young man he sees with dreadlocks is up to no good. And his wife is trying to check him and say, hey, you need to stop with your prejudiced ways, this, that, and the third. Then there's about 7 other stories in here as well. This is actually my newest work here to date. What's today, like May 15th, 2025. This is Live from Heaven. This just came out January of this year. This is another collection of short stories, except every single story in here takes place in heaven. One of the stories is about a man that's at the gates of heaven, and he's talking to Jesus. And then he sees Adam and Eve walk up. And then he starts to berate them and say, how could you all do that in the Garden of Eden? You mess it up for the rest of us. So then God hears that, and then God decides to humble the man. Another story in here is about this skunk. Now, this skunk lives in this part of heaven called the elite section. And the elite section is basically reserved for any animal that rode Noah's Ark while they were on Earth. So pretty much the skunk is having a problem that he wouldn't have been having if he weren't living in the elite section. Then there's about 10 other stories in here as well. This is the Fuse paper. This is a fictional newspaper. This actually came out 2023. It's a collection of articles, fictional articles that I wrote. One of the articles is about this new law that actually prohibits men from approaching women in a romantic way while women are pumping gas at the gas station. Another article in here is about this nightclub. And this nightclub has a rule that if a man gets a woman's phone number inside that nightclub, that man has to actually pay the nightclub a fee for every single phone number he gets. Then there's a few other articles in here as well. Again, this is the Fuse paper. This is not out yet, but it will be out shortly. We gotta like resize it and stuff like that to fulfill Amazon KDP's requirements for this. But this is part 2 of the Fuse paper. Excuse me, this is volume 2 of the Fuse paper written by me. Again, collection of fictional articles I wrote in here that I compiled that to make a fictional newspaper. About 40% of this is articles that have to do with the military. Like one of them in here is about how service members can't get certain cosmetic surgeries anymore. Another article in here is about how some service members went overseas. They had a competition of how many women they could get pregnant in this particular country that they were stationed in. And then they came up with an interesting ploy to get out of responsibility for those children that they made. Some other articles outside of the military world is about how the president came to Chicago, to a Chicago beach, and then an incident happened. And somehow through that incident, the end result was the president gifted that beach to another country. So now this other country's rules applies to that beach, even though that beach is in Chicago, USA. Another article in here is about the effect of the removal of the shot spotter in Chicago. What's going on with those people? What new laws are implemented in place of the removal of the shot spotter? There's a few other articles in here as well. You're gonna wanna check this out, the Fuse paper part 2. Thank you all for watching my video. I'm gonna link the work that I do have out already. I'm gonna link it down below. I appreciate you all for watching this through. Let me know what you think. God bless you.